What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, the other day we did have a big update for Nintendo Switch Online with more games heading to the service, and it also opens up the conversation around the number of updates that could be showing up each month, and we'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about what appeared to be a massive game leak that absolutely shocked the internet for Sony. This, though, coming from the court filings and documents around the Activision Blizzard situation, and how doesn't look like things are as they appear. We'll go over that and more today, guys. If you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with a sale on the Nintendo Switch eShop. This for Square Enix, which we can see this posted up over on their sales and deals page. As you can see, it is currently live and will be running until March 30th. And there's actually quite a bit in here, even like Final Fantasy Crisis Core Final or Reunion, that is 20% off down to $40. That Chrono Cross, the Radical Dreamers edition that they were talking about fixing and adding updates and stuff to, down to $14. Dragon Quest Treasures is 40% off at $36. That's actually pretty good. Diofield Chronicle, they have the digital deluxe edition. That one's 50% off down to $37.49. Various Day Life down 34%. Neo The World Ends With You is half off down to $30. We do have the Collection of Mana. That's half off down to $20. Then you also see many of the numbered Final Fantasies that are just on sale, like 12, for example, that being half off. And then we also have Star Ocean, the First Departure R. That's 60% off down to $8.39. So a pretty good deal here across the board from different Square Enix titles. And again, that sale is currently live on the Nintendo Switch eShop. Also, here's an announcement that came out of left field. It's Toxic Crusaders. Yeah, here's the trailer, and as soon as I saw it, it reminds me of Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge, that kind of that old school arcade looking beat 'em up game with 4 players. And Toxic Crusaders was like an old 90s cartoon, and it was certainly a strange cartoon, although Saturday morning cartoons back then were all kind of weird, but I mean, they all had their charms and quirks and stuff to make each one unique. Anyway, Toxic Crusaders, again, definitely did not expect to see this game, but it looks pretty cool. It just currently has a tentative release year of 2023, and it's up on Steam with more information and all of this, but I'll be following up on this one because it is pretty cool to see all these different arcade beat 'em ups kind of have this resurgence now with Streets of Rage, or as we saw, just a brand new Ninja Turtles game. So why not Toxic Crusaders? We'll see if we get a release date later on this year at some point. Oh, and we had just talked about how Far Cry 5 was going to be getting some sort of requested update, at least that's according to their Twitter account, and we were going back and forth on what they could do. The most obvious was just lifting the 30 FPS frame rate limit on the Xbox and PlayStation versions that are backwards compatible on the newer systems. Well, we can see this on Twitter. Looks like that's exactly what they did. We're celebrating with a native 60 FPS update for PS5 and Xbox Series consoles, and a free weekend from March 23rd to the 27th on all consoles and PC. Now, some have had a chance to test this out. It appears that on the Xbox Series, it's just native 4K at 60 FPS. Before, it would like lower the resolution to 1080p, I think, to get to 60, so that is a nice resolution bump. I believe on the Xbox Series S, it is 1080p at 60, and on the PlayStation 5 currently, it's like some weird resolution just under 4K that then upscales up. But either way, across the board, looks better and just feels better at that higher frame rate. So definitely fire up Far Cry 5 again on console if you haven't in a while, because it's still a really good game, and now at 60 FPS only gets better. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo Switch Online and a big update that was announced the other day from Nintendo over on Twitter, which we can see this, starting with Gameboy, that being Kirby's Dream Land 2. A lot of Kirby recently, right? Well, it makes sense to take advantage of some of these older Kirby titles. There were quite a few of them, and now that Game Boy and Game Boy Advanced are added into the mix, a lot to pick from here. Burger Time Deluxe, another pretty fun game from back in the day on the handheld there. Then moving to Super Nintendo, Side Pocket. So I saw some people scratching their head at this one. This was actually, believe it or not, a pretty good game back then. Okay, I know you look at it now, it looks very rudimentary, it looks very basic, but For the time on the Super Nintendo, getting a pool or billiards game like this that actually had quite a bit of depth to it when it came to strategy and, of course, shot selection and all these different things. They had like these little kind of like obstacle courses that they had set up for you to try to get like a single shot to knock all the balls in. It was a fun game. A friend of mine had it and I rented it at one point just so I could try it out for myself over the course of a weekend. But that game specifically, for some reason, one of the few Super Nintendo games that really like sticks in my mind next to Mega Man X or Super Mario World or so on there. And then for the Nintendo, we have Xevious, which is another really good title to get added in. And this is for the $20 base Nintendo Switch Online. Something to keep in mind here, because we did see the Game Boy Advance side with Metroid Fusion have a title added in, obviously, and then we see this, and now I'm wondering, does that mean we could then see an announcement for a Nintendo 64 game, right? That get added in a week or two, and then maybe we get Sega Genesis to kick off April, and then we're back to the Game Boy Advance, and then the following month you get Super Nintendo and Nintendo. And that's the biggest thing is now, Nintendo has really built up Nintendo Switch Online with what they were really aiming for, which was a content delivery platform, not necessarily a services delivery platform. We understand that Nintendo's biggest limitation is their ability to deliver a robust online platform when it comes to communication and mostly playing games online with a lot of the features that PlayStation and Xbox have. However, the big unique thing that Nintendo has is the Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo, all of that, and they have been delivering on it more and more rapidly, especially with the addition of Game Boy and Game Boy Advance. I mean, let's look at this list again very quickly with the tweet. Take out the Game Boy and you just have like Side Pocket and Xevious, and while, yeah, we look at that and say, well, okay, I guess it's Side Pocket, Xevious, sure, but having the Game Boy games added in, that's 4 titles. I mean, that does add quite a bit of value, and that was actually one of the questions I had for a poll at some point. I did ask it, so we'll check it out later on in the show to see where exactly people are most excited to see games being added in. Next up, let's talk about a shocking game leak. I mean, really, this took the internet by storm. No one saw this coming, and it came out of the Activision Blizzard situation with Microsoft and Sony going at it all across the world. The UK, we have the FTC, the CMA, the EU. It's all over the place, right? But we are seeing more and more of these documents, and a lot of time it's a massive just drop of information, like sometimes hundreds of pages to go through. But at times we get some pretty weird bits of information. One in particular we can see, this posted up over on PlayStation Lifestyle. They had a little snippet here at 2.20. Says this figure shows the impact of PlayStation exclusive releases on Xbox console sales. This applies for big titles like God of War or Superman. There has never been evidence that exclusivity of one single franchise can drive console sales. That sounds like a conversation for another day, but yeah, you see God of War and then you see Superman. Does that mean that Sony is currently working on a Superman game? I mean, they're doing a lot now with superheroes. We see Spider-Man, we see Wolverine. Those seem a lot of excitement, a lot of hype behind it. We've already seen what Spider-Man can do for them sales-wise. Superman, though, getting added. Interesting to go to DC. Is it possible, though, just throwing this out there, that that's actually supposed to say Spider-Man? Most likely, yes. It was interesting because it made the rounds pretty quickly online, and people actually got kind of excited about it. And that's the first thing I was thinking, looking at it. God of War and then Superman. Okay, that was supposed to say Spider-Man, right? But the way I'm looking at this, okay, you have to remember, these are lawyers, people outside of necessarily the video game or nerd culture space with even Marvel movies or comics or any of that. I kind of picture it like when your mom or dad or whoever was maybe watching you play a game. They're like, all right, time to turn off the Nintendo. And you go, this is a PlayStation, right? Because they don't know. To them, it's okay, it's Nintendo. That's sort of what I'm thinking here is they were looking at it and someone was like, yeah, Superman, whatever. It's all the same. And trust me, I would love to see a company like Sony handle Superman because it hasn't gotten great games in the past. In fact, it's one of the most hated titles back in the day for the Nintendo 64. And I was hoping Rocksteady would have done Superman, but they're doing Suicide Squad, although Superman is part of that. But come on, if it was Superman right now, and that's what we're seeing with a single-player narrative-driven experience from Rocksteady, there'd be a lot more excitement for their game, as opposed to right now, where it's a live service, always online Suicide Squad. But yeah, in this case, no, I don't think this is actually leaking out Superman. Although I guess it would be kind of cool if that were the case. I just think here, just a lawyer who didn't really care or know much about this just said, well, superhero, whatever, throw Superman in there. Next up, we are going to stick with that Activision Blizzard situation, as we did have some more information around this, specifically with Sony pushing back to Microsoft, and then apparently a bunch of other companies and CEOs and people in the industry taking Microsoft's side. We can see this posted up by VGC. They say UK regulators post 6 studios' responses to Microsoft Activision deal, all saying it should go ahead. In fact, from what I can see, it kind of feels like Sony is indeed on an island when it comes to this deal. There were some in here that said that they thought the opposition, which would be Sony, were kind of overblowing the situation when it comes to Call of Duty and the effect on the market if Microsoft were to own Activision Blizzard. And I've also seen some things brought up that's like, not many companies are going to be able to buy Activision Blizzard, and clearly they are looking to be purchased because the word going around is that Activision Blizzard was calling different companies and larger publishers and corporations to see if someone could buy them. Well, you eliminate Microsoft and say it gets blocked. Who else would come in and buy Activision Blizzard? What's their plan B? It might be Tencent. And people were like, well, hold on. Do we want Tencent to come in and buy Activision Blizzard? So you're kind of weighing out a lot of those options, and then you look at Microsoft and go, okay, maybe it wouldn't be so bad if platform holder yes with Xbox, but Microsoft came in and bought them instead. We also had Sony push back about Starfield and them saying that it was supposed to come to PlayStation, but Microsoft cut that down after they acquired ZeniMax and Bethesda, because remember, the big thing right now is Microsoft says that Call of Duty will remain where it is. Starfield, though, being a different case technically, but we can see this posted up. This one was from Charlie Intel, where they had the little snippet here. This from Sony in response, saying it is about the impact of Microsoft making new Call of Duty releases, which are launched every year exclusive, as it has done for the new releases of Starfield and Elder Scrolls following the acquisition of ZeniMax in 2021. As the PFs explain, these releases were announced in 2018 and were not expected at that time to be Xbox exclusives. It was only after acquiring ZeniMax that Microsoft's Phil Spencer revealed that all along, the deal had been about delivering great exclusive games for Xbox. I think most people can look at Starfield when it was first unveiled, and most of us thought, okay, well, yeah, it's probably going to PlayStation and Xbox and PC. Right? That was what the consensus was. But then Microsoft came in and picked them up, and then people were kind of back and forth, and yeah, then, okay, Starfield is now exclusive. Technically, though, and that's what a lot of this is falling back on, there was never platform logos that showed up at the end of the trailer. There was never any actual evidence that said, yes, this is absolutely going to the PS5, but most of us can clearly assume and just deduct with general reasoning that, yeah, this game was going to cost a lot, so they're going to look at to put it as many places as they can. Who knows? They might have gone through cloud streaming to get it on the Switch if they weren't going to be able to make it run natively. However, I assume this case is just going to be run on general facts of the situation, and considering Sony can't actually prove that it was going to head to PlayStation 5 at some point, then it's not really a great argument for them. Although, there were rumors that they were in talks with Bethesda and ZeniMax about timed exclusivity for the PlayStation 5, so I guess they might have documents proving that, but then they'd also be proving to regulators that they were working on timed exclusivity, which is something that Microsoft has been using against them. So technically, Sony's kind of stuck here. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the Famitsu sales charts. These, of course, tracking week to week. And I've been following them a bit more closely because the PlayStation 5 has really found its footing and has continued to outsell the Switch in Japan, which is strange because for years now, the Switch has been leading the Japanese sales charts, no problem. But we can see once again, we'll start here with the software. Kirby's Return to Dreamland has just been hanging out at the top, 32,000 copies, then Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, then Splatoon 3, then Fatal Frame, Mask of the Lunar Eclipse coming in just over 10,700 copies. And people seem okay with that. I mean, I know Fatal Frame's not this massive franchise that releases and just immediately sells millions and millions of copies, so it was good just to at least see that game get another release. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Then we have IB, that's 9,000 copies there. Then Fatal Frame, again on the PS4 at 9,031. So all things considered, nearly 20,000 copies they're selling for Fatal Frame in its opening week. Hogwarts Legacy, then Wolong Fallen Dynasty, then Octopath Traveler 2 that just has not had a good run of things here in the early going. Moving over to the hardware, the PlayStation 5 still at the top, 64,869. The gap was a little close here with the Nintendo Switch just behind at 59,901. Then the Xbox Series jumping up by about 2,000 units, 2,887. And the PS4, 1,602. The PS4 is still continuing along. In fact, there are weeks where it will actually outsell the Xbox Series there in Japan. And then the 3DS had a bit of an uptick. 30 more systems sold this week, coming up to 97. So while there were no massive releases here across the board, it is still interesting to see the PS5 continue to hold on to that top spot for hardware when they have like 1 or 2 entries on the software side in the top 10, and generally it's not in the top 5 for software. So I think it still is just pent-up demand, and obviously people looking towards something like Final Fantasy 16, although Hogwarts Legacy has continued to sell well enough there, and I'm sure that has pushed PlayStation 5 systems along. But we also know Sony is dealing with a bigger, I would say, digital split than even Nintendo now, so it's possible that people are just buying PS5 systems even in Japan and just downloading the majority of their games. But I am still curious what will happen with PS5 sales going forward as we get closer and closer to that Final Fantasy 16 release. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, which of these systems on Nintendo Switch Online are you most interested in seeing new game announcements for? And it was just a runaway here for the Game Boy Advance at 57%. The Game Boy, though, only 5%. I'm curious about that because most people are excited for the prospect of Pokemon Red, Blue, Yellow, anything there, or Crystal. That's Game Boy, or Game Boy Color, but Game Boy. So a little surprising on that one. And Nintendo 64, 27%, Super Nintendo, 10%. Then the poor NES, 1%. So I think this just goes to show that something really just like the Game Boy, like as basic as that. Okay, we're adding Game Boy and Game Boy Advance in. All of a sudden, a lot of the sentiment around Nintendo Switch Online has really flipped, and maybe that's just people looking towards the possibilities with that library or just having more content added in. I wonder if the Virtual Boy would have this same kind of effect. Hey, maybe we'll find out someday. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Just Saying, it's shocking to me that Sony and Nintendo still refuse to implement Hall sensors in their controllers. I got Joy-Con drift within 8 months on my DualSense 5, and a friend of mine has it on 2 of his controllers. Well, Hall effect sensors, I know they were in the Dreamcast controller. I saw people point that out. I've actually made a whole video on that, and the Dreamcast controller never really drifted, so there's really not a lot of cases of that happening. So Hall effect sensors, at least the idea, in theory, should work. There are different form factors taken into account there, like the Joy-Con joystick is like lower profile and all of this. I feel like these companies, I don't want to say want your controllers to break, but they don't want them to last forever either. So there is that sense of, if we can sell you 3 controllers this generation, as opposed to just 1, with a Hall effect sensor stick in there, then that'd be better for them overall in their wallet. I know they generally will show off different controllers, whether it's special edition, different colors, etc. But if they can sell you the same plain black or white controller, just basic DualSense controller or basic Joy-Con over and over again, that's just free money for them. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Were some of the most recent additions to Nintendo Switch Online? And actually, how are you feeling about the service today? And then also, what about Superman with Sony? Do you think they're actually developing a new game there for that character, or was that just a typo from a lawyer randomly during the entire situation with Activision Blizzard? Thanks, guys, for watching. Have a great weekend. I'll see you back here Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time for Newswave.